bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Varendas, also known as Ricky Varendas, and today we have a great episode for you on sports and corruption and conspiracies. We have two past guests on today, Jason Bermas, who has done a lot of great work on the McGregor story and has been on the show a bunch of times. We've talked about Epstein, we've talked about McGregor, I think last time he was on, but he's one of the few people actually keeping up with that story. So we get into that, we get into MMA, we get into basketball, we get into soccer, we get into a lot of different things linked to sports, corruption, and conspiracies. Also, another past guest is Brian. I'm not even going to pronounce his last name incorrectly. I'm going to save you that and just spell it for you, because if you want to look up his work, his last name is Tuohy. That's Tuohy. And he wrote the book The Fix Is In, and then he wrote other books like The Fix Is Still In, More Corruption and Conspiracies the Pro Sports Leagues Don't Want You to Know About. And he has a great website. You can follow him on Twitter at The Fix Is In, and then his last name, Tuohy. The website, I think, is fixesin.net. Jason Bermas, you can just look up Jason Bermas and you can find his work everywhere. His last name is Bermas. He's also a documentary filmmaker. The very first time he was on my show, which was a long time ago, was actually, I think I had him on to talk about 9/11 because he was part of the 9/11 Loose Change documentary. So, and he's done Invisible Empire, Fabled Enemies, a bunch of great documentaries that are free online, so please check that out and support his work. He's constantly putting out new stuff. We talk about a lot of different stuff. I mean, we get into the FIFA scandal. Some people have done great work on the FIFA scandal because I didn't really get as deep into it as I would like. One was Ken Bensinger, who wrote the book Red Card, How the U.S. Blew the Whistle on the World's Biggest Sports Scandal. That book is phenomenal. It goes into Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, Chuck Blazer, just all these really interesting people. And also another one is Andrew Jennings, which is he's been in a couple documentaries on soccer scandals, and he's a journalist who's been following investigative journalist who's been following soccer scandals and corruption for a long time. So definitely look into him. Just Google Andrew Jennings journalist and you'll find him. And so it's a really, really fun episode. Sam Tripoli is supposed to be with us, but we kind of messed up on when the start time was. Or I think I wrote in the emails a few times it was supposed to be Eastern time, 7:15 Eastern time, but I either didn't write it or he missed it or whatever it may be, but he couldn't make it. So hopefully we'll have him on again in the future. If you're a Patreon supporter, then you would have known about this episode. Like I've told you guys in the past, anybody who's a Patreon supporter will know about guests that I'm scheduling and people that I'm in conversations with scheduling. So you know way in advance. The second I'm in conversations with a guest, you know that the show's coming up and who's going to be on and what the topics are going to be. And you have also the benefit of asking any questions. If you want me to ask anything, you can tell me. If you have any suggestions, you can tell me, and you can communicate me directly on my Patreon page. And you can give me $1, you can give me $1 million. Either way, I'm gonna love you and appreciate you. And if you actually did give me $1 million, it'd be great, because I could do this full time and I could focus on podcasting and not doing my shitty job I hate, just like the rest of you guys who might also be doing a shitty job that you hate. So this is much more fun to be able to feel like I'm doing something and contributing something to the world. But enough whining and complaining about my crappy job, and more about appreciating the fact that I get to get these guests on. And Sam Tripoli actually had his channel completely removed off YouTube, and it's back. It gave me a little bit of anxiety because I started thinking about, some of the topics I talk about, like alternative treatments to cancer and medical benefits to like the ketogenic diet, including, preventing and treating cancer and all that type of stuff, and vaccine topics and alternative medicine, any type of vaccine or cancer or alternative medicine. These topics are just, they happen to be trigger words for big pharma and YouTube, and apparently you can't have these discussions. So I've had people on who like Dr. Tom Cowan and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and the writers and producers and directors of the documentary called The Big Secret, which was removed from Amazon Prime, even though it wasn't supposed to. And also Del Bigtree in the past was on with the documentary Vax, which is also removed from Amazon Prime. So my point is that these conversations, this podcast, is more important than ever. And to bring it back to when I was talking about my Patreon page, if you can contribute something, great. I really appreciate it. If you can't contribute something, then share these shows. Tweet them, post them on your Facebook while you still can. Post them on your YouTube channel. I don't care if they're on your YouTube channel. Put them up. I mean, that way, if if they remove my channel, then at least it's posted in a bunch of other places. So if any of these conversations, any of these podcasts seem really important to you, share them. Start a ripple and just spread them as far as you can. And hopefully it'll also spark some thought and some alternative views and stuff with people that you know and love. And hopefully spark some interesting conversations about some of these topics. Also, on my last podcast, I talked about how I got a cease and desist letter from actually Podomatic, which is where they host my podcast, or I shouldn't say host. It's where I post it, and I buy storage and bandwidth off them, and saying that there's another Ripple Effect podcast that is saying that they have my title, they trademarked it or whatever. So there is a podcast called The Ripple Effect out there. Hopefully, this goes away. I've been trying to get in contact with the company that was, I guess, that had the Ripple Effect trademarked. I also was trying to get a hold of the attorney. We've been playing phone tag forever, and it's just gotten to the point where now I just give up. I've tried to contact everybody through their social media, emails, whatever, to try to resolve this, see if I can just slightly change my name, if it would be okay. All this stuff. I mean, the name of the podcast came from a song that I wrote called The Ripple Effect, which is the theme song of the podcast. It's been on iTunes forever. I own the rippleeffectpodcast.com. That's my domain name. It was available. I bought it. I've had it for a while. So if you go to that, you go to my podcast. So it's not like I didn't attempt to see if there's another show called the Ripple Effect Podcast. I did when I started this 6-7 years ago, whenever it was. I didn't find any other podcast named the Ripple Effect Podcast. Even now, you will struggle to find the podcast that they're referring to. You'll find only links to my show. So I don't know, but hopefully we can resolve it. It can be called the Ripple Effect Podcast with Ricky Varandas, and it's acceptable, and I can stop getting sued. I already don't have a lot of money. This show's been not a very good investment in regards to ability to kind of keep itself alive. I don't make enough money off Patreon or even on music sales. None of it together comes close to paying for my bandwidth and storage. So if I have to deal with getting sued, then I really have to rethink the podcast. So hopefully it doesn't come down to that. But either way, the good news is it's going to stay the way it is, and I'm going to continue doing it under this title and this format and everything until something happens. So that's the good news. Holidays coming around the corner, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all this stuff. Hopefully it reminds you how important it is to spend time with the people you love, laugh, drink if you do drink, smoke some weed if you smoke weed, whatever it may be. Just do the things that make you happy, because sometimes just talking about these very depressing topics and stuff like that can kind of bring you down. But it's also important that we remember the reason why we're talking about all this stuff is to remember that we need to make the world a better place, and if we all contribute into exposing corruption, into trying to leave the world better than the way we received it, then more of us can laugh, and more of us can enjoy life, and more of us can not be used and abused, and have better lives. So I guess that's it. I guess I just wanted to leave on a positive note. And I have a bunch of episodes that I'm brainstorming, and ones that I'm also in the works of scheduling. So hopefully you get another one of these very soon. Also, my wife has brought up possibly doing a podcast together, which I didn't think she'd ever want to do because she doesn't listen to my show and she doesn't listen to podcasts. So why would she want to be on the show? But that's something that maybe you can look forward to. And also maybe a Fights with Friends, which is when we live record and we stream live on YouTube during a UFC event, and I just hang out with the friends. We drink, we talk, we share personal stories, we laugh. And if you've listened to any of them in the past, we do a lot of laughing, a lot of drinking, and a lot of bad dick jokes. So hopefully if you enjoy that, then you weren't surprised when you heard one of those Fight with Friends podcasts, if you're a new listener and you're like, what the fuck is this? But either way, enjoy the rest of your week, the rest of your day, whatever it may be. And I'll see you guys on the next one, hopefully very soon. Thanks. Peace.
What's up?
You are the busiest man in podcasting. I swear I get like 100 notifications a day. Jason, like your YouTube channel, like another episode. I'm like, how does he find the energy to do this?
I've actually been slacking. I really got to get back to doing like 5 to 7 a day, more than 3 to 5, and maybe 7 a day. When I was doing like 5 to 7 a day, my growth was a lot better. So I got to keep doing. I just got to keep motivated.
I know it kind of sucks that it's not so much about quality. It's like you could spend all this time, investigating, reading through the articles and all this stuff, gather all this information, and then do one long good episode. But unfortunately, like, just the more stuff you put out there, the more likely people are going to run into it. Plus, people have short attention span. So I think your channel is like perfect because it's like these short little videos. Not everybody has the time to listen to a long form podcast. I know I love them. I think you guys listen to them too, because I think you can really get deep into a topic and you never know where the conversation takes you. But I think, unfortunately, like, the world we live in, I mean, people are just constantly getting stimulated by phones and updates and all this stuff that their attention span even my attention span, I have a hard time. I used to be addicted to documentaries, and I could sit through one even if it wasn't that, that interesting or if it was a little bit slower, but I find myself struggling to get through them, even though I'm like, I want to learn about this topic. I want to learn about, what they're presenting in this in this documentary, but I'll find myself 5 minutes into it, if it hasn't captured my attention, I'll start looking at my phone, or I'll be like, oh, what else is there that I haven't watched in a while, and it just, so I think we're all victim of it.
Well, this way I look at it, right? When I was doing a 3-hour broadcast via regular radio, you'd have 5 breaks, right? So you'd only get like a couple, like 2 5-minute segments, and then maybe you get 3 juicy segments, but in there, you were never really talking to an audience for more than 15 minutes anyway, right? And a lot of times your things would be broken up. Now, I'm my own producer. Instead of me reading the articles and then like highlighting them and trying to get you to see them, they're right in front of you. I play the video clips myself. I don't rely on anybody else. Everything is right there. And they're always in segments. I try to make them at least 10 minutes long. It's rare they don't go 10 minutes. But then if I do want to keep going, I do. I never get caught up in a long form interview. And instead of taking phone calls, which, at first I thought I'd start taking phone calls, but I really like the chat format better. Let me tell you why. when you get on a phone call with somebody and you're going back and forth, sometimes it's hard to end that, or they're contrived, or they talk over you. They have to get to their point in like 144, it's 200 characters on YouTube. And then you get to respond to that. And if they want to respond, they can. It's in there. Maybe it gets there, maybe it doesn't, but you're still interacting with the audience. So in a lot of ways, I think the YouTube format is almost perfect for me because, you know, when I was doing that, you have to sit there for those 3 hours, no matter what. And you have to do all this other stuff. I can take 3 hours and I can make easily sometimes 5 videos at a 10 to 15 minute length span and, you know, and have, you know, thousands, tens of thousands of people watch them, digest them. And like you said, if they want to turn it off, they can. In the radio world, when it was a lot different, and maybe there was just like me and you'd be able to play a clip and talk about something, they'd zoom in, but you really couldn't see it. Well, it wasn't as well produced. It wasn't as connected. Again, you were taking calls, you were interrupted by breaks all the time, and I don't think it was as direct. So as long as they don't kick me off on the 10th, you know, they kicked Sam off for like a day, and thankfully he has friends in high places. I'm going to keep at it, man. We're at 37,000 and growing. I'd love to be at 40,000 before the end of November. That's high hopes, but why not? Let's reach for the stars, and then 50, 100K, and keep growing from there.
Yeah. I was pissed when I saw what happened to Sam because it's like he's the nicest dude ever, and he always does a really good job of like, you know, the thing about comedians too, I feel like they can get away with it a little bit more too. You figure they give them a little bit more leniency because, like Rogan, you know, it says he's like, oh, I say dick jokes, so he's like, you know, how can you take me seriously? Why is my opinion so important? You know, so it's almost like you figure, okay, he's a comedian, you know, maybe the powers that be or whoever is regulating this or afraid of you know, I guess provoking thought and getting this information out there wouldn't be so concerned about Sam, because it's like he's a comedian. Who's going to take him seriously anyways, even if he is talking about the, you know, the Epstein story or controversial issues. So so when that happened, and to put all that stuff online, he has 200 plus episodes, and just to make it disappear like that, and to have that type of power over people's work, it's awful. I mean, it's, you know, just all that work of recording it, booking, you know, we know how much work goes into researching and then putting together podcasts and interviews. And then next thing you know, it's gone. And it's not gone from everywhere, but I mean, YouTube's a huge platform, and a lot of people, you know, were subscribers and you know, and run into his work on there. If you're looking for another, you know, maybe another interview and you run into it, you end up being exposed to some good stuff. So it's, yeah, it was good to see that it's back. It is a little scary you know, knowing that happened. And like you said, everybody's talking about December 10th and what's going to happen then. And a lot of, I think my show, you know, your channel, and a lot of people who do what we do, I think we're concerned. We're concerned. We don't know how much longer we're going to be on YouTube. Luckily, I'm kind of like James Corbett. I've never taken a penny from YouTube because I've always been concerned about, you know, I'm like, well, what if I do monetize something, and then next thing you know, I'm pissed because I was kind of, you know, depending on that money or whatnot. So I'm just like, you know what, fuck YouTube. I'm not going to take any money from them, and that way, you know, I don't feel like I lost anything if I end up getting kicked off YouTube. But it definitely is a huge issue, and censorship, I think, continues. And to get right into this, censorship, McGregor, I think Jason's been one of the few people to talk about the story. It's been kind of, well, I mean, to get Brian into this too. I mean, have you been following the McGregor stories and kind of the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes?
Not too much, because he seems, I don't know, he just seems like a comedy show and is of his own. I mean, he's just kind of, you're talking about Colin McGregor, right?
Yes, Conor. Yeah.
It just seems like Conor. Sorry, but yeah, he just seems like he's like almost a professional wrestling personality now, and not really a fighter as he used to be. And so, yeah, I don't pay much attention to what he's doing anymore, because it's not of interest to me, for one. But two, like I say, it seems like he's become almost like a cartoon character. And unfortunately, you know, obviously, it's not, what he's doing is not the best of things. I mean, what is he in trouble for now again? Is he's got like 2 women against him now? 3? I forget where he's at.
Well, we'll have to ask Jason. He's probably one of the few people who have been keeping up with this story.
Well, I mean, you know, I think that the lack of knowledge on the subject and the fact that, you know, it's almost just looked like a WWE clown show is a testament to the power of Disney and its PR machine through ESPN and other outlets, because this isn't a clown show. This is a really, really serious allegation. It's not even an allegation. Let's stop pretending like this is an allegation. It's so far from an allegation. I mean, you can see it in the shadow ban on my pinned Twitter feed. Either you guys can go there and you'll just see my entire thread is actually gone, because the mainstream outlets in other countries that put any information out about this, I promise you. Wow, do they delete those? Oh man. For instance, we're talking about maybe some sexual assaults against women. That's not what this was. On December 10th, we have high-level police officials that say all of the evidence, not some, all of the evidence, which includes forensic examinations, which includes witness testimonies of the entire night and the act itself, saw that this woman was brutally beaten and raped and sodomized in front of people in this hotel. And I'm talking about beaten to the point where she was bleeding. She had choke marks all over her neck. She had bruises all over her body. She had to have a tampon surgically removed from her cervix. And because she was on her period, that's why she ended up getting sodomized. We can go into speculation here as to how she got out, but she was taken to a hospital. She feared for her life, not in just the hours and days afterwards, but until the end of December or early January, when she gave a formal statement against him. Now, other witnesses had already named him, but because she didn't name him, nothing was done. Doesn't matter that he showed up the next morning with his barrister, aka his lawyer, guys, and said it was consensual. And then when they did pick him up in January, he is still saying it is consensual. Well, I don't know how you consensually have sex with a woman and beat her within an inch of her life, basically, and then brag about it. I mean, basically, after I have consensual sex with a woman, guys, I don't know about you, but the first thing I call my lawyer, and then I head down to the local police station and let them know how hard I scored. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. And she's already turned down over $1 million. We had a member of Parliament, Ruth Coppinger, I believe is her name, actually bring up the incident without naming him in Parliament a couple weeks ago. And there's crickets in the fucking mainstream media in the United States. And I'll tell you why. Because he's worth billions of dollars depending on how many times you get him in that octagon. You get him in there once, it's probably a clean billion for Disney to split up with WME Entertainment and the UFC and all their little fucking subsidiaries. You get him in there twice, could be $3-5 billion. Now you look at a guy like Epstein and how long they covered up how many crimes there. Why do you think it's any different for this guy? Why? Because he's not a hedge fund guy? No, he's still worth billions of dollars to other billionaires. So, they're really hoping that either she doesn't take the money or she takes the money or somehow this goes away. And like I said, it's almost been a year and almost nobody in the mainstream media has even touched on any of the details I just talked about.
Well, you said some of the Irish media was kind of there's a law, right? There's something about they can't actually come out and talk about a specific, or I guess say his name.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. So unless you're convicted in Ireland, and by the way, this is the thread. If you're me and you're logged in, you can see the thread. If you are not me, try to go check out that thread. And by the way, there's more to that. So yeah, let's see where I can go. 11 more replies, and I'll show you guys this right now. Basically, there's an 8% conviction rate in Ireland. Okay, and the fact of the matter is that with that conviction rate, you're not allowed to name the person who's alleged to have done these things. It's an Irish law. So 92% of these people never get convicted, never have their names come out. And somebody like Paddy Jackson, who I didn't even know who the fuck he was because I don't follow rugby, who I guess has a name out there, was in some crazy rape scandal. The trial took 42 weeks. And at the end of the day, he was let go with his buddies and people were outraged there. But again, when 90+%, first of all, in a sexual assault situation, what, do 1 in 4 women, 1 in 5 women report that? You're already at a pretty low statistic of even calling it in. Now, out of that, let's say 1 out of 10 of those women is just a straight liar. All right. So now we're talking about 1 out of 100 women in a situation. Okay. So you're pretty sure that this person's there. And then you're telling me 92% of those women that actually came forward are liars, not 10%? Get the fuck out of here. You know, the system is rigged against these women. And again, the UFC, WME Entertainment, Ari Emanuel, Dana White, all of them are hedging their bets. Dana White was asked about this in August. He said, oh, when I did talk to him about it, I don't know anything about it, but when I did talk to him about it, he said it wasn't him. And then obviously that's not true. It's been confirmed now there's another investigation to a separate woman that took place about 2 months ago, again in Ireland. So now he had to admit when Brett Okamoto asked him about it, he didn't really comment on it. He's like, yeah, we don't love to hear those things. You know, how are they getting away with this? Give me a break. We don't love to hear those things. You're trying to put this guy as the fucking headliner of everything. He's on your EAA sports games. I got to watch commercials for his shitty whiskey. This is not a he said, she said thing. The details are over. Let me just read you some of the quotes now that we have my banned Twitter feed up. Okay? I want to make this extremely clear and how long they've been out. All right? And no one's talking about them. All right, 12/13/18. This is 2 or 3 days after the event. At the end of the day, there is no doubt that this young lady suffered a horrendous ordeal. The examinations and all of the evidence shows that she was raped and very badly assaulted in that penthouse suite. So let's scroll right down here. This is 12/12. This was the headline of this one. Mom accused of Irish star of rape was found battered and bruised. All right. Discussing those statements that I told you were made by other eyewitnesses. These statements are hugely detailed and complex and go into the minute detail of every aspect on the night of the attack. Guys, this is 11 plus months old, not being heard. And if you get into the articles, they're even more than this. That's the Mirror. And by the way, that's irishcentral.com because everybody's, oh, they're tabloids. Oh, are they? Headline 12/12. Woman allegedly raped by Irish sports star was choked during ordeal. There were clear marks of choking around the woman's neck shortly after the incident on Monday morning. The woman resisted and bit the man in question. Because, you know, again, when I'm having consensual sex with a woman, I'm often viciously bit by her. I've actually had it happen once. A Halloween night, weirdo bit my tongue. I bled a lot. It was new for me, but she had great tits. Anyway, so let's continue, my friends. All right. 12/12/18. All right. And this one's out of the Sun. Was left with bruising after the alleged attack, while there was also suggestions of bleeding. Oh, yeah. By the way, guys, not the first time he'd been accused of this before. So this event in December, it appears he's already made some go away. He was previously accused of attacking another woman in recent months at a separate venue. Oh, not just once. Not just once, but several times prior to the December incident. Are we seeing a picture here? All right. There are reports of previous incidents that happened also involving the sports star and members of his entourage in Ireland. These may also be revisited. Now, in this one, they said they quietly got away, by the way, or went away. In other words, he paid her off and she took the money. Let's continue. 12/15. Now, like I said, she hasn't even made a statement on the guy afterwards. He wasn't arrested until January 17th or 18th, right? And the only reason we could confirm he was arrested then was somebody from the RTE News Network actually leaked a fax of him being arrested. And everybody said that was bullshit and rumors, and it didn't matter that weeks later they were almost fined for it. It made the mainstream media. But again, not Connor. Not Connor. She's in a deep state of distress, and she is absolutely terrified. She was allegedly beaten viciously during the incident, and she is terrified for her life. She is in absolute fear. Part of the problem is the sports star is linked to people who are dangerous. Let's continue that. Now, this is the same article. The people that are dangerous are alleged to be the Kinahan, which are the Irish mafia, which allegedly are some of the witnesses that didn't give statements, shockingly. All right. So all these people that think she's in it for a payday, we're talking about December or mid-December. She's still scared shitless Forensically, the hotel room has been identified and examined by forensic experts. CCTV has been downloaded, and they have spoken to staff. They have all sorts of witness testimony. They got video of her going in there with a group of people, not just Connor. They have her coming out beaten and bloody. She was taken in a hospital. I mean, give me a break, all right? The woman has handed over her blood-stained clothing to Gardy, and that is now being examined, all right? So let's keep going. Here we are, end of December. She's still too afraid to make a statement, okay? All these people that want to nut hug this guy's never fucking fighting ever again. I will never let this guy ever step into a cage to make millions of dollars ever again. This is insane.
Well, he's supposed to fight in January.
Understood she was in a highly traumatized state with extensive bruising, okay? Although she was in contact with the Gardy about the alleged rape, she has not made a formal statement. So finally, when he did come in, Connor told the police it was consensual. This is when he makes the formal statement, and they have to let him go after the fact. You want to get into the brutal details? Those are the WhatsApp messages that leaked with local press who I have identified from there that will describe how she was beaten to the point of having a tampon surgically removed from her cervix. Some of the really good details are in there. And that's about the end of the thread, guys. As soon as somebody from TSN, which is the Canadian affiliate of ESPN, started retweeting these very real tweets that, hey, I don't make an opinion on it. These are all just quotes and articles. It got shadow banned by Twitter. So if you log in, you go check me out at Jason Bermas, you go to my pinned tweet, you won't see any of that. You'll just see a bunch of people arguing about nothing. Thanks, Twitter. Way to go, ESPN and Disney. Keep pushing this guy.
So
maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, Ricky. Maybe I'm crazy.
Well, I think, it all does seem kind of crazy until you actually look into it. I mean, not to sound like Eddie Bravo, look into it, but it definitely, I mean, most of these arguments are made with people who actually haven't taken the time to look into any of the stories, they haven't done any research. I mean, that's usually the case with not just sports conspiracies and corruption, but that's just the case with just about everything. You get an argument with somebody soon, 5 minutes into argument, or sometimes 5 seconds into argument, you realize like they really haven't looked into this at all. And they're arguing with you and they're passionate about it and they're convinced that you're wrong. So, Brian, do you want to add to this? Well, what's your opinion on all this?
Well, I was going to say, part of it is, like you say, it gets, like you say, shadow banned, or it gets censored, or it's just, ignored by the powers that be, because, like you say, a guy like McGregor means a lot of money to a lot of people, and they don't want fans to know. So when you do have, like you say, fans arguing about it and say, hey, you're making this up, hey, this isn't really what's happening, you're conspiracy theorists, like you say, it's not necessarily that they don't do the research, it's the fact that it's not thrown right in front of their faces like a lot of other things, that they actually have to do some digging when they shouldn't have to do digging to find certain information out there that should be blatantly obvious to everybody. And that, I think, is part of the problem with all of sports, is because it's such a money-making opportunity for so many people. They just want the good, positive stories. And unless, like you say, the police are involved, and in this case, obviously, with the Irish laws and that sort of thing, where they can't make things publicly known about the name and the people involved, well, then how are people going to know about it? If they make it very difficult to find this information, the common fan is not going to find it, because, like you say, if it's not on the front page of ESPN, here it is, this is what's happened, then nobody knows it happened. And so when you do bring up certain facts and figures and things that may be a little more hidden but can be found with some diligent work, people tend to ignore it. Because, again, if it's not right in your face and they're not saying it to you, this is what's happening, they don't know. So it's more almost a willful ignorance, I find, on a lot of the sports fans' part about a lot of this stuff.
And Dana White's such a piece of shit. I mean, I saw an interview today with Gina Carano, and she was on the ESPN MMA show, and she was talking about how when they wanted her to go to the UFC, how, she spoke with Dana White, and then she's like, well, you got to give me time to get a camp and all, just give me some time or whatnot. And she was at the time in a contract with Strikeforce, I believe, at the time. And they're like, hey, you know what? We'll actually get you out of your Strikeforce contract. We'll pay for all the expenses. We can't obviously be involved, because obviously that would look really bad and probably illegal. So they would actually get a third party to pay to get, to negotiate her out of her contract. And so, I guess there was a kind of a look behind the scenes of because they wanted her to fight Ronda, I believe. So it was like just the lengths they will go to make money. And then she was taking a while, I guess, because she wanted to get a camp and she was choosing her team or whatnot. And Dana ended up text messaging her saying, like, this bitch is taking forever or something like that. And he writes her, or Gina writes him back saying, I think you texted the wrong person. He's like, no, I don't think I did. And he's just, that's just, and Gina's like one of the nicest people. I obviously don't know her personally, but my wife's name is Gina, so I have some experiences with Gina, but they seem, she seems super nice and sincere. And for, Dana White to be such a dick like that, and then, just, it doesn't seem like something she would lie about. It just kind of shows you, what really goes behind the scenes. And, Conor McGregor, he's like Jason said, he's a huge moneymaker. Love him or hate him. Mayweather's the same way. Love him or hate him, you're watching. And when you're talking about that type of money, there's no lengths that they won't go to keep his record clean. And they're talking about a possible fight in January. The rumor is him and Cerrone possibly fighting. I don't know have you heard anything about any updates on that, Jason? Do you think it's not going to happen?
Listen, man, they already tried to buy this woman off. She already didn't take $1 million. Again, they're not reporting that in the United States. And the reason the people don't have the information is because it's purposely distorted. It gets whitewashed by the New York Times. You know how much I wanted to vomit in my mouth when it finally did get reported in the New York Times? I think it was over at the back-to-back Bellator events. And I'd reported on it like a week and a half before when it was out in the Irish media again, the second one. I came back to my hotel after the first night of fights, going to the second, and I turned on ESPN. And what am I watching? I'm watching a 5-person panel talking about some bullshit scandal with the Astros and sexual harassment and somebody not apologizing enough for someone being fired for something they said they fucking said. They said? Oh, okay. Well, how about the fact he brutally beat and raped this woman in front of people? It's not the first time. Like, what are you talking about? But we can't talk about the number one draw in sports. I had when I actually the second night I was at Bellator. I got tickets, and God bless the Mohegan Sun for probably being the best venue to go watch those fights, because there's so many comp tickets for gamblers that aren't even going there, and it's such a big arena. I scored basically seats right behind the press, 2 seats, $50 a piece. I probably could have worked her for even less than that. So for $100, we had right behind the press corps, and like 2 rows deep, pretty awesome. One of the press guys recognized me. Not only from my McGregor stuff, but from some other stuff, but especially the McGregor stuff. And we started talking about it. And he's got a site called worldcombatreport.com. And he did a great couple articles. And the latter one, he says, let's talk about this. A lot of times we forgive and forget. Floyd Mayweather is still probably the number one draw in all of combat sports if he wants to step in that ring. And we got court documents where he was punching his girl and giving her concussions, man. We got testimony from his kid that he did such a thing in front of him. So, that doesn't stop Floyd Mayweather from being at the front of any sports show he wants and the cover of every magazine, still called Money Mayweather. No one calls him the guy that beats the shit out of women, So, that's the world we live in. And everybody wants to talk about Me Too, Time's Up. Listen, even the Epstein thing proved that's not true. If that was true, him and all of his cohorts would be locked up. Epstein would still be alive. We would have treated it seriously, and we would have started taking down that Leviathan. I haven't been talking about it for over a decade now, Ricky, because it's not fucking real. And these aren't the people that run the show. And think about all the people that have been outed as other powerful abusers of children. People like Dennis Hassert, a serial pedophile for decade upon decade, 3 heartbeats away from the president, really 2. If the vice president goes down, the president goes down, he's the dude.
Yeah, speaking of
he helped exonerate other pedophiles like Foley. People have given Anthony Weiner a fucking pass. He's going to be in the legal marijuana business that's rigged in New York. So, I mean, if the game isn't so rigged in your face, and it's on both sides, man. You look at a guy like Bill Barr smiling in your face saying, I thought it was a conspiracy too, and he definitely hung himself. I mean, we're supposed to buy this shit. And it's on every single level of power. When you're worth something to the power structure, when you fit that narrative, hey, man, we'll find a way to gloss it over. And when you're not, when it's time to burn you, when we got to get rid of somebody, we'll Cosby your ass. Don't get too uppity. Hey, we'll say, Cosby, not a hero. Also in Epstein's black book, for those that don't know, definitely deserves to be in jail.
But don't swear. But don't swear. But don't swear. Remember, Cosby used to get mad. Don't swear. You can rape the bitch, but just don't swear at her. It's like, it's crazy. Brian, you want to add to that?
Well, I was just to say, going back to the mixed martial arts end of the whole thing, when you go back even further and you go back to boxing in the 1950s, and you realize how controlled it was by organized crime, and that really one guy ran organized boxing, this guy Frankie Carbo, and he would organize who would fight who, where they would fight, when they would fight, and sometimes who would win and who would lose to make sure certain matches took place. I equated very much to the UFC today and the power that Dana White has. And so when you think about that sort of control and power, because I mean, if you're not fighting in the UFC and mixed martial arts, where do you fight? I mean, where do you get the big money? Where do you get the exposure? Where do you get the pay-per-view events if it's not the UFC? So you're almost forced to kowtow to these guys and do what Dana White wants you to do. And so, like you say, he can control who gets to fight, where they fight, when they fight, are they on pay-per-view or not? Their contracts are all one-sided in the UFC's favor. And then you throw in the mix like ESPN and other broadcast entities like that. And, then you see why McGregor and the likes of those type of people get protected. Because it means, again, too much money to too many people. So they can throw out the evidence they don't want you to see. They can focus on, he's just a great fighter. Oh, Mayweather, look at his story. He's gambling and betting hundreds of $1,000s on this or that other thing, and ignore all the past, like you say, abuses that they've dished out onto women and just roll with it. And again, if fans don't see it, if it's not put in their face that this has happened or that has happened, then they just see the positive spin and they roll with it. And it's the same. Like I say, if you go back, it happened in the 1950s. And it was the same thing. You had, plenty of boxers who had plenty of problems back then. And it's the very same thing today. It's history repeating itself, and no one seems to care because it's so entertaining and it's a great distraction.
Do you think, because I tend to believe, and let me know if you guys think it's probably true, that a lot of these stories, that there be many more stories out there, but the UFC has become such a huge organization, and they have so much power and influence on your career that fighters aren't saying anything bad about them. They're not talking about, they can't. I mean, you look at Mark Hunt. When Mark Hunt fought Brock Lesnar, they kind of like, hey, yeah, we'll give you a drug test, but by the way, we're not going to get the results till after the fight, so you could possibly kill somebody, illegally by, being on illegal substances, but we're going to let this pass. We want a clean, sport. But yet we're gonna just sign you up a week before the pay-per-view, let you fight, and then we'll say that you were loaded up with steroids after the fact. And Mark Hunt tried to sue the UFC. I thought hey, he has a pretty good case, especially if he had brain damage or something, and he lost the fight. So and yet that just went away. It's it's off our hands because it was USADA or whatnot. That's kind of like the recurring theme. Is always it's USADA, we're not doing it, but of course there's backdoor meetings and with everything, and there's always going to be hey, how about you let this go or you don't let that go, and don't get me wrong, there's been cases where I'm you know what, if it was completely corrupt, then why would they expose this guy as a cheater right before a pay-per-view? It happened with John Jones and when they had to move the event last second. It's okay,
completely corrupt. Listen, Ricky, look, Mark Hunt just lost the very last part of his lawsuit yesterday. Okay, he didn't have kind words, nor should he. Oh, no, yeah, there was one final death blow. He had one more chance. There are a few people that are actually contesting the UFC. They've been litigation for years at this point. One of them is my very own co-host for Mixed Martial Mindset. That's with John Fitch. Randy Couture is part of it. Kyle Kingsbury, Kung Lee, Ryan Jimmo used to be a part before he passed. But very few fighters want to get involved. And I'm so glad that you brought up USADA, because what we discussed earlier on the show is the fact that basically it's all bullshit, and it's been all bullshit. Where is it? Do I still have it up here? I might have actually gotten rid of it. But they just came out and said basically they're just going to selectively enforce. They've already been selectively enforcing.
Yeah, they had a new policy, right, that came out today? Something about a new...
They did type in USADA or Dana White or any of them. They're all now saying, well, a lot of these fighters are just getting it from tainted supplements and different meat products, meat products.
Now, look, to be the devil's advocate...
John Jones popped for way hotter than what Frank Mir popped for.
That's true.
But Frank Mir is not a part of the system. And here was the deal with Nate Diaz. This is what happened. Nate Diaz, they knew they could pop him for something, right? Because they could pretty much pop. It's all selective enforcement. USADA is not a real organization. They kind of invented it for this whole thing. So Nate Diaz pops hot beforehand, but they say, Nate, don't say anything. Don't worry. Disney owns us now. It's all cool. WME Entertainment. We worked out the Saudi Arabians. They don't own anything. Ari Emanuel wants you to do this. Disney wants you to do this. We got The Rock. We got a belt. We need this to go. All those guys, even if they get pay-per-view points, have a to-show price and a to-win price. And a lot of times it mirrors that. So it could be 50-50. So if they're paying him $500,000 in pay-per-view points, right? All of a sudden it's $1 million in pay-per-view points if he wins. However, let's say he does win, and they say, oh, well, he tested positive for this. We're not sure if we're going to overturn it or it becomes a no contest. The UFC saves $500,000. Maybe they even save something on the pay-per-view end. We don't get to see those contracts. I don't know what's up. So Nate Diaz was actually brilliant as soon as they tried to set him up with that, saying, nah, I ain't playing that game. If they're going to say I'm hot, I'm hot. And they just realized at this point, when you're promoting a guy like John Jones, and he is their number one consistent pay-per-view draw with no Conor, right? You never know when Nate Diaz is going to fight. I mean, even to sell that one, they had to bring in Hollywood's biggest star and make up a belt that had motherfucker in the title. I mean, think about how cartoon level in WWE that is. But that's where we're at, man. You got to understand, when WME Entertainment and Ari Emanuel facilitated that deal, Ari Emanuel already had his hands in there. You were talking about Mafia. I mean, who do you think the Fertitta brothers are? They're Galveston, Texas Mafia. You're not in the casino business that long, lifelong, family long, without being an organized crime. That's why I can't stand it when people are like, Trump's an outsider. I'm like, to some extent, but he's a fucking gangster. What do you think? They just let him do Atlantic City without the Mafia coming in with those casinos? Are you fucking retarded? Like the contracting alone on building the buildings was probably so Mafia run it would make your head spin. Point being, higher level Mafia came in. Billion-dollar Mafia came in. Not just millions and 100 million casino. No, WME stepped in. Now, the biggest level Mafia that had actually been invested in that before was Saudi Arabia. Remember, they had that first big card in Dubai, and they built the stadium, and it was a big disappointment. I think Henzo fought on it. I think Anderson Silva might have fought on it as well. But it ended up being a garbage card. But they got like $450 million in investments. They were WME Entertainment and Ari Emanuel, who, by the way, is Rahm Emanuel's brother. If that gives you a dual Israeli citizens, as involved as you can be, he is with Hollywood and Israeli policy. This guy, Ari Emanuel, he steps in somehow. He returns a $500 million investment to the Saudis after the Khashoggi thing. They used the Khashoggi murder and that scandal to return that money and get them out of the business. How is that possible? That's what $8 billion buys you, man. And now you got Disney with an exclusive U.S. market deal, which is the UFC's biggest market in there. I mean, what do they already own? Marvel. They own fucking Star Wars. They're pulling all their Miramax shit that's adult from everything else. They got their own streaming network. They got the Hulu stuff. Now they got your sports. I mean, this is the big conglomerate. Those are devil horns, those Mickey ears. That's what they really are.
Don't you think with the with the drug testing and all that, I mean, isn't that a great way to basically control fighters? I mean, because like you say, because you could say they're all on something. I mean, it's the same with the NFL, the same with Major League Baseball. They're all doing something because there's no way like Tom Brady can play to 42 years old and be, just eating right and doing push-ups. I mean, he's on something. So if everybody tests positive, or even if, they randomly test them and just catch some guy here or there, how easy is it then to turn that on an athlete and make him play ball and make him, get an outcome that you want and get to say, hey, look, we can either out you as a user or you do this for us, or you do that for us. I mean, I think that's a perfect thing to control these athletes with, because they feel they have to take because everybody else is doing it. And to perform at that high level, you need steroids to help you recoup. You need them to help build up your body. So everybody's using it. So you just selectively enforce it, like you said, when you want to enforce it, and then you can bend people to your will. I mean, it's almost like built-in blackmail, but every athlete's going to, capitulate to it because there's no other alternative.
And we got the nice UFC Performing Center for you. And as the more fights, you got the Reebok deal. You get $5,000 the first 5 fights, but then it starts to get a little better for you. And hey, you get to do cocaine. Look at our superstars. I mean, you want to talk about performance-enhancing drugs? I mean, let's be honest. Liddell was on the blow when he was in the cage. You watch that motherfucker in there. He is wired as I'm being honest, man. If you don't think that he was doing coke, and if you don't think that John Jones was more than just a casual user of cocaine, and they covered that up as well, it's not just party. That's a stimulant, man. So like I said, they've announced major changes to UFC anti-doping policy. It's basically, we're going to call it like we see it, and it's going to be selectively enforced. And listen, when you're making up belts, look at all the stuff they've done in the past month. They're changing their policy. They're making up belts. They're bringing in movie stars. They're trying to compete with the WWF. And, on the side to that, when they've moved with Disney and, they put up a paywall with ESPN Plus, can't get a pay-per-view unless you have our service. Might as well pay the other $6 and get everything bundled, right? You already have Hulu or whatever. I mean, they're really tightening the grip. And it's unfortunate because I'm not saying that MMA is a pure sport, but it certainly, to me, got a lot more of the interesting fights done on a regular basis than you saw in boxing. You could have a hardcore boxing fan, and I'd be tested to know if they knew the careers of like 20 guys currently. A hardcore MMA fan, I could probably rattle off 100 different fighters that I'm interested in right now. You know what I mean? And they're interesting fights, and it sucks where we're at right now. Like, you look at the heavyweight division. It's the best in boxing, but in the UFC, it's kind of thin, right? I'd say that, to me, one of the more interesting fights probably will never happen. Ryan Bader looks sick at heavyweight in Bellator, and I'd like to see him fight Miocic. I think Stipe and him are a reasonable size. No one's too oversized. You got two really good guys in their prime. Probably won't happen. That's unfortunate. We haven't seen a lot of fights happen. And then when they happen too late, like Tito and Chuck for the third time, they could be kind of sad, man. Yeah. They could be a little sadder than even boxing.
Liddell should have done a little bit of coke before that fight, because
he should have done an 8-ball.
Yeah, he should have done a lot of coke before that fight, because that was really sad. It was like watching two people that I don't know, man. These guys, I don't know if it's the money or I still play basketball. I'm a huge basketball fan, and I play soccer from time to time, and as you get older, you definitely mentally, you still know what to do, and you don't move nearly as quick as you should or whatnot. But like Brian said, all these guys are on something. I think there is an argument to be made for HGH. I think these guys, it alone is more of a recovery type of thing than it is a muscle builder, or it's not something that specifically designed to just build muscle. If you're working out and stuff like that, it helps with the recovery or whatnot. And these guys, their careers, especially football players, their careers are short, and one bad injury and you're done. And let's be honest, when you're in college, the universities don't give a shit about you showing up to class. They don't care what happens after you leave, the college. So you're stuck with no education, which, that's a whole nother argument or conversation alone. But unfortunately, in the system we built, it doesn't. You have no education. You have, you're an ex-athlete with no work skills, nothing, no other passions. So you're basically fucked, and we don't care, so that's why I'm like, HGH, you know what, let these guys do fucking HGH. They recover faster, maybe it'll extend their careers. It helps with ligament tendon rebuilding. It's just to me, it's like, it's funny where they draw the line and whatnot. But I mean, we can go into you look at, it's funny because the major sports, I think when Brian was on last time, this was quite a few years ago, we talked about this because I'm a big soccer fan and I'm a big MMA fan and I'm a big basketball fan. That consumes about most of my sports. But it's amazing how in soccer and kind of in MMA, you're starting to see a little bit of corruption. But in the other sports, like, they're fucking huge in America and nothing ever comes out. And it's amazing the job they do of keeping the lid on it. You had the one ref in the NBA that came out, and then everybody's like, "Oh, he's just a crazy dude. Don't listen to him." And but to me, the common theme with all this is that there's a lot of money, and when there's a lot of money, there's going to be some fuckery. There's going to be people like us that are probably sports fans, and I look forward to watching Tottenham play Saturday mornings, or I look forward to Saturday nights and watching the pay-per-view event, the UFC event. But there's a lot of suits and ties who are just looking at quarterly gains or how they can make more money, and they don't give a shit about the sport. I mean, there's a lot of people who buy teams just because it's an investment, not because they care about the sport. And these people have huge influence on what's going on, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and now you did take a step back, like you're talking about the drug testing thing. I mean, you remember that was started by the NBA because so many of their players were like on cocaine. And it became a problem. I mean, I think they did a survey where they found like 75% on the league was taking some street drug or another, and they were afraid it was going to corrupt the game, and it was causing them to lose fans, so they instituted this first drug testing policy. And so that's where it all even began. So like when you go back and you were talking about, let them do HGH, let them do this or that, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think you should let them do whatever they want to do if you're going to be a better athlete and be better protected and be able to play. Because right now, like you said, they're all doing something anyway. So who's fooling who? I mean, you saw in the 90s, you saw the way the home runs were flying out of baseball parks. And it was only because Barry Bonds was such a jerk about it all that fans really took interest and cared and were upset that he was breaking the records he was breaking. But they didn't care when McGwire and Sosa was doing it. And now today, you see balls flying out at an incredible, alarming rate. And again, is it the baseball? Is it the players? Who knows? But the thing is, if you have this drug testing policy and it seems like no one ever gets caught, well, how is that possible? How is it you can have all these major league players, all these NFL players? I mean, the NFL banned HGH something like 4 or 5 years ago, and not one player has been busted for using it. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a lot of them are using it. How has one player not been tested positive for it? Well, it's probably because they are testing positive for it, but again, are they making the players do something they want them to do, potentially throwing the game or, manipulating the game? Or are they just throwing all that out and just saying our league's clean, everybody has nothing to worry about? And I think that's the big problem, is that you have athletes all over in the Olympics, you have it in cycling, you name a sport, and athletes seem to be taking some sort of performance-enhancing drug. And yeah, it's not good for kids to do it, and you don't want necessarily teenagers imitating, their heroes doing it. But at the same time, let's be honest, it's going on everywhere. And for the sports to say we're all clean and fine and dandy, I think is insane.
Yeah, well, you look at Icarus. That was a great documentary, kind of just showing the lengths. I mean, unfortunately, it kind of was used as a propaganda tool to just be like, hey, look how evil the Russians are, and but it's like you said, it happens everywhere. It's not just there. And there's that.
And how evil can the Russians be if our athletes are beating these Russians who are taking these drugs? So you have this whole system set up in Russia to help all these Olympic athletes, and they're not all winning gold medals. They're being beaten by Americans. They're being beaten by other, European and Japanese and Chinese.
Blue pumping through their veins. That's all it is. It's just miracle. How dare you say besmirch our athletes?
Well, because you got Lance Armstrong. That's why. That's how you can do it. For a guy who claimed for 10 years, I didn't do anything wrong, and then finally admit it. But I mean, that's the thing. How can you just look at Michael Phelps and say, yeah, he set all these records, he was the greatest swimmer ever, and yet we know he was beating guys who are using? I mean, really, is he superhuman, or did he just get away with it?
Well, I think there's some exceptions to the rule, Jeanette. I mean, I've been a gym rat since I don't know, like I was 15, 16. I mean, I can't remember like the last time I missed a full week of not going to the gym. I mean, I literally will spend 4 days at the gym. I play basketball 3-4 times a week for years. I mean, I'm 34. I've been doing it since I was 16, and I work out with people and I play basketball with people that are just fucking freaks. I mean, there are people that are just like, I'm like, this person is just like, I'm like, I you know, I do podcasts with you know, people who are experts in nutrition and diet, and I'm constantly obsessed with you know, training and different techniques and different philosophies of it. And this person with, you know, I'll have a conversation with them and they're coming to me with the advice. I'm like, you can jump over me. You know, I'm like, you are a freak. I'm like, you know, I can give you advice, but it's amazing how little, you know, some people know about, you know, the ins and outs of nutrition or training, and yet they're just freak athletes. And so I think there are some exceptions to the rule. I think when you're talking about all the major sports and you're talking about, I mean, football players, for example, I mean, there's quarterbacks that are running faster than, you know, running backs or wide receivers back in the day. You know, it's like, it's crazy how athletic they are. I mean, I definitely think when you get to that size of a human being and you're that athletic, I definitely think when you have that many, because I mean, literally every football team is just full of, you know, quote unquote exceptions to the rule, you know. And so I think eventually you have to be like, yeah, you know what? There's not that many freak athletes. They can't all be, you know, it just happened to be in sports and that many of them. And I think you do have to start questioning things. You know, when you look at soccer, you know, soccer has huge scandals. You know, the thing about soccer that always makes me, I guess, it's interesting to me is that people in America don't realize how big it is. I mean, you take all the professional sports in America, and literally, like, it's bigger than that. I mean, I was born in Portugal. I mean, my dad, the second I stopped playing soccer, never watched me play anything else ever in my life. Never, you know, he never once went to my, you know, watch me play basketball, and I still play basketball, you know, and never once went to my game. Like, that's how much he eats, breathes soccer. And that's how it is all over the world. So you're talking about how powerful these people are. I mean, some of the FIFA scandal stories, I mean, some of the people involved, you know, have been ranked like 70th most powerful person in the world. You know, you have what is it? Fusion GPS is linked into these stories. Christopher Steele, which a lot of people know from the Trump story. You know, initially he was hired by England to help get the World Cup there. Then he was hired eventually from to work with the Trump thing. But you know, all these characters have huge influence, and they're all. I mean, soccer is the biggest sport in the world. Go to anywhere in the world and you can discuss soccer with them. And so think about how, and especially when you're talking about international tournaments, Euro Cup, World Cup, you know, stuff like that. You have countries against one another, not just a city rivaling against another city, but you have countries. So to get, when Putin got the World Cup there, I mean, there's tons of scandals with just, you know, people getting, I mean, some of them, I guess, construction costs was like just out of the window. A lot of people believe that it was one of his techniques to try to get reelected, was trying to get the World Cup there. So, and then publicly he would be loved and people would love him for getting the World Cup there. So it was a political thing. There's so many things, you know, it's just so many interesting characters and stories, and the guitar story, which of late has been getting a little bit more traction. But in America, we don't hear about these stories because people don't care about soccer. It's like the 8th page in a newspaper. If anybody reads a newspaper anymore, it would be the 8th page. And the thing is, you know, guitar, there's people dying. I think just recently I heard an interview where somebody said that as many people are going to die making, you know, building immigrants in guitar, building because they don't have the infrastructure to even host a World Cup. So immigrants, as many immigrants are going to die as people who died in September 11th. You know, so that's just kind of a comparison of just how many immigrants are dying, you know, and then never mind that, like, World Cup's supposed to be in the heat of the summer. they've completely rescheduled it to push later in the year because you can't have it when it's 140 degrees. I mean, you'd have soccer players dying. So they had to redo everything because all these schedules, the Premier League, the Champions League, all these leagues kind of are scheduled back to back, so players can kind of play them all. And they went through just hula hoops to get it in Qatar, and England was actually supposed to get it, and there's that's how it all happened. That's how Christopher Steele's got on this to help England get the bid. And when Qatar got it, that's when they started exposing the corruption, or Russia, and they started exposing the corruption. So, all these characters are really interesting. I tell people, look into, Andrew Jennings, who does really good research on soccer. He's a British journalist. There's a great book, see if I can find it, called Red Card, How the U.S. Blew the Whistle on World's Biggest Sports Scandal. And the reason why they say U.S. blew the whistle is because apparently a lot of this laundering of money and bribery goes through U.S. companies and banks, and that's how much of an influence the U.S. has all over the world. It's just like even a sport that we could care less about. All these we're connected, and there were the guy who wrote Red Card, the book. He talked about how other countries, and this goes back to just when a sport is so beloved and so big, people are afraid to talk about it. It's similar to Conor McGregor. In England, they politicians won't investigate it because nobody wants to be the politician who exposes a team that they like, or ruins the sport that they love. So if you're a politician, it's like hands off. I'm not going to touch this. I'm not going to go into publicly get in trouble for getting this person in trouble, or that team in trouble, or whatever. So people don't touch it, and that's why kind of the U.S. was people in the U.S. because there was a IRS official who loved soccer, and I think the initial person they got in trouble was Chuck Blazer. If you don't know about Chuck Blazer, look into him. He's a very interesting figure. He was one of the most powerful people in FIFA. They call him the Mr. 10% because basically for 17 years he didn't file any taxes or anything, and he had all these front companies and everything, and he helped. This is how important this guy was. Chuck Blazer helped put together the women's soccer team. They helped put together the World Cup for women. They help the MLS get contracts with big TV stations and channels. And this guy he had his hands in all these negotiations, all these deals, and he took 10% on all of it. And FIFA is supposed to be a non-profit, so there's all these people working for non-profit organizations making tons of money, and this guy has no records of anything, but yet living this luxury lifestyle. And he was the first one that they turned. It's an FBI agent and an IRS guy who loved soccer turned him, and he's the one who was basically recording conversations and stuff. But it's a really interesting scandal because as much as I love MMA, basketball, these other things, it seems like small potatoes when you look at how big FIFA is and how many countries are connected to it and all that stuff. Have you guys gotten into any of the international soccer scandals?
I just remember that there were headlines 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a while since that one big headline with that. But again, I played soccer in high school. That's about the best I got.
To me, it's fascinating. You brought it up, and I don't have a good answer for it. But why are so many powerful people into sports? Why do they own teams? Why do they work so hard to bring the Olympics here or bring the World Cup there? I think that's a really fascinating question. And again, I don't have a good answer for it, but I think it's something, regular people should ponder because why does it matter where the World Cup is played? Why does it matter where the Olympics are played? Why does it even matter that any of those events even take place? You know what I mean? What's it give you? What does it matter? Every country that hosts the Olympics loses billions of dollars, and they build these massive stadiums, and then they just rock.
But Brian, the country might lose.
You've seen it in Russia. Everywhere.
The country might lose money, but even with Russia hosting the World Cup, when that happened, there was contractors that were making millions. So the country, so it looks like, it's no different than like Amazon makes zero in profit, right? And they say, oh, look, we don't have to pay any taxes. We didn't make any profit. But they're expanding, and the owner's a billionaire and all this stuff. So it's like on paper, it looks like, oh, who's benefiting from this? But behind the scenes, there are people benefiting, and contractors and people, linked to these people.
Exactly. But again, that goes back to who are the power people and why do they get to put on these events? Why haven't, fans stood up? Why haven't they tried to take back their games, take back their sports and that sort of thing? And again, who are these power brokers that are allowed to really, almost kind of rip off the entire world to pull off almost these, it's almost like a heist in many ways. If your country, like you say, you get to host the Olympics, and then you get to decide who, like you say, the contractors are and who gets to make that millions of billions, if you will. It's almost like a heist. And yet fans don't care because, they get to see swimming once every 4 years on TV. But who are those power brokers and why are they so involved in sports? That I think is a really fascinating question.
Well, it's similar to politics. The names most people know aren't really that interesting. It's it is the Chuck Blazer and some of these other people who in the behind the scenes. I mean, you look at Khabib's manager, Ali, whatever his name is. He has a very interesting past. FBI informant. Possibly connected to some terrorist groups. Like he has a and there was a article. I wish I could remember. It was by Bloody Elbow called "All the Champions Men." And it's like, and then it went into like just all the really shady people that were around Khabib's group of his manager and some of the people connected to him. But I mean, Khabib's manager, I mean, just really shady history. And it's just these are names that everybody knows Khabib, everybody knows McGregor, but they don't know this dude. And the guys who did Cocaine Cowboys, they did another documentary about baseball. It was called like I don't know if any of you guys watched it. It was Hardball or so, I don't know what it was called, but it was about baseball. It was about some of the steroid issues. It was but they reenacted it with little kids. It was really funny actually. And
yeah, I've heard about that one.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of it is, but in that documentary, A-Rod was obviously a big part of the steroid scandal and stuff like that. I mean, he was linked to like, I don't know if it was gangsters or mob or whoever, but some of the people that were linked to this story were talking about like the shady people that A-Rod would hang out with and the death threats they were getting. So like even these athletes that they're on TV, they're doing analysts, they seem like super nice guys who are just really good at a sport. I mean, these people have huge influence and they also are connected to really shady people. Jason talked about McGregor and the mafia. I mean, the Irish mob. Yeah, that sounds like far-fetched. Oh yeah, what is an MMA guy doing with the mob? But like, no, they the mob's not dumb. They you're talking about a celebrity that has influence, has money. Let's help each other out. It's all business. That's what it's all about.
And they might own them. I mean, the mob might own McGregor. I mean, they owned fighters in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and probably even going into today. I mean, they owned boxers. They literally were. They may not have been the manager of note, facing the fans and whatever, but they were owned behind the scenes by organized crime. And that could go back even to, like I say, McGregor. That's why he's associated with these Irish mobsters, because they own them. They control them. They may not be the face that they see. They may not be the face that the UFC sees, but they may be the guys who are actually in charge of everything for what he does.
Yeah. Well, it's all very fascinating. It's very, because it is one of those things where when there's that much money involved, I mean, people are obviously betting on sports all the time. Why aren't we hearing about scandals all the time? Like that's how good of a job they do of hiding this stuff. Because without a doubt, there has to be scandals. There has to be stuff going on. And I mean, I know in college sports, there's a ESPN documentary. I think it was 30 for 30, the college team that was paid off, for throwing games or whatnot. But it's almost like, you see small, stories and things that are, don't seem that that huge of a story. Like it seems like a very isolated incident. But when it comes down to like big stories, it's just, and a little bit. I mean, my brother's a huge basketball fan, even bigger than I am. And he I talk to him about stuff, and we, once in a while we'll be out drinking or whatever. We're not drinking Conor McGregor's shitty Irish whiskey. We're drinking some nice American bourbon. But and I just love bourbon. But just wanted to throw that.
Basil Hayden, that's a good one. I don't know if you drink Basil Hayden, but that's my bourbon.
I love Basil Hayden, Woodford Reserve, Angel's Envy, Jefferson's. Yeah, I did actually a whole podcast on the history of bourbon. I'll send that one to you. But but yeah, I mean, we're out there and we'll be talking. I'm like, I'm like, people will be talking to me and they're like, there has to be some corruption in sports, right? And there are people like, I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to hear it because they're like, you're going to ruin it for me. But it's the important thing. And Brian, I've heard you say this on my show and on past interviews. People have to understand it is entertainment. Legally, they're not required to give you a fair sport. Like they're not like legally required to make sure that they follow their own rules, right?
Exactly. I mean, there is no law that prevents like the NFL or the NBA from fixing its own game. There's no law, I think, that would even prevent the UFC from fixing a fight because it is an entertainment industry. And they're basically professional wrestling, but they just go by a different name. But I think the reason why you don't hear so much about the corruption is there's no investigative reporting. Nobody does it. ESPN doesn't do any real investigative reporting into the NCAA, into the UFC, into the NBA, into the NFL, because they fund all of those entities. So why would they shoot themselves in the foot by saying, all right, well, we're going to really investigate this college program, or we're really going to investigate this NFL game or this player, for whatever, because it's just going to hurt them in the long run. So when you have no investigative reporting, then all you're going to rely on is basically police reports or FBI investigations. And I know for a fact the FBI used to investigate for fixed games back in the 60s and 70s, but they quit. They quit in the 1980s investigating, potential games having points shaved and that sort of thing happening because they were tasked with fighting the war on drugs. So they gave up on it. So if something falls in their lap, like the Tim Donaghy thing did from the NBA or Boston College did in the 1980s for them shaving points, then yeah, sure, they'll go after it. They're not actively seeking any of that out. So if, the networks aren't looking for it, if the, law enforcement isn't looking for it, well, who's going to out the corruption? Who's left? The players aren't going to come out and admit things. Although Vontaze Burfict, who just got suspended from the Raiders and has been out most of the year, just came out and said he thought the NFL fixes its own games. And he told that to The Athletic earlier this week. But, I mean, besides a player like that coming forward and saying something, there's no investigating going on because sports is just entertainment. And fans don't want to hear those things. They don't want to hear about potentially, this player was beating his wife, or this player was abusing his kid, or this player was raping these girls or whatever, because then it's going to affect their fantasy team. Then it's going to affect their betting. It's going to affect the enjoyment they have from watching these games. They don't want to hear it. So if they don't investigate it and they don't uncover those things, nobody hears it and everybody thinks everything is great. And like I say, it's the same with the drug testing. They can test these guys. They cannot test these guys. How do you know as a fan whether they do or they don't? The only thing you know is when a guy gets supposedly caught and gets suspended for it. But otherwise, you just assume the game's clean. You assume there's no corruption happening because no one's telling you otherwise, and they don't want to tell you otherwise. That's the scary part. They don't want to ruin that entertainment factor because that's how they're making their money.
Yeah, and I know we all bashed, we've been bashing sports for an hour, and I do say that I understand, we live super competitive, stressful lives, and I think that there is something nice to like, okay, I can't wait to get home and watch the Celtics game tonight. I can't wait till Sunday and watch the Patriots game or whatever it may be, or the UFC event. It gives us something to look forward to, and I think that in that aspect, there is room for it in our lives. It's when you're talking about Epstein all the time, like Jason is 112 times a day. I'm kidding. When he's constantly putting out videos and giving updates on these really depressing stories and sad stories all the time, and I'm sure many people who have stressful lives and stressful jobs or whatnot, it does give you a little bit of relief. It gives you a little bit like, okay, my mind is away from everything and I get to just focus on this. But again, me being a soccer fan, I know how far people can take it. And, you hear stories of people being violently killed, murdered, all these things. I mean, the Two Escobars was a great short documentary that 30 for 30 did that really showed the corruption of soccer, and really interesting documentary if people haven't seen it. But we can't let it... We can't forget that it is only entertainment, and you can use it to help you, relieve some stress. But when you become fanatic and you get to the point where it becomes a religion, where you hate somebody because they don't like the same team, then to me it's crazy. And I say this all the time. It's amazing that we've taught people that you don't talk about politics or religion, or there's certain, topics that you don't talk about at the dinner table. We have Thanksgiving right around the corner. It's like, don't bring up, anything that's going to spark argument, like the important stories that's going on in the news. But you could argue all day about sports. Like, nobody ever tells you don't bring up sports because it's going to spark argument. You can argue all day about sports and nobody cares. So it's like the thing that doesn't really matter that much, like that really doesn't have a huge effect on what's going on in the world, we can argue all day about. But the things that are important, that we should be striving or attempting to having these, civil debates, then that, it's off limits. Don't even attempt to talk about it. It's like, no, what we should be saying is talk about it, but attempt to, not argue about it, but share ideas. And if you disagree, then share your disagreements. And to me, that's much more beneficial. So it is funny how sports is the exception to the rule. We can argue all day about sports, no big deal. But when you're talking about the important things, it's like, don't bring up politics, don't bring up foreign policy, don't bring up, vaccines, believe me, I get in arguments all the time about vaccines. But it's just, it is one of those things where it's like people don't even want to have the conversation. They're not even willing to discuss it with you. It's like, okay, well, where do you stand? Let's share our what we've learned and see, maybe at the end of the conversation, we'll be a little closer to one another. We might agree to disagree, but at least I have a better understanding of where you're coming from, and I think that's super important. But speaking of Thanksgiving, I know this is probably a busy week for both of you guys, so I don't want to hold you up too much with the holiday week and holiday coming up later this week. So I just want to thank you both for coming on. I truly appreciate it. Can you tell people where they can get your work, any upcoming projects you have going on? Brian?
We both went silent.
Yeah, sorry.
We have nothing planned.
That was my fault.
Well, for me, people can go to my website, which is thefixesin.net. They can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at thefixesin Tuohy, which is Tuohy. And then my books are available on Amazon and hopefully at your local bookstore, which is probably where you should be shopping anyway, not Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, I'm posting 3 to 7 times a day. I'm a page. That's what I do. I do it daily. You want to support me? Please go over, join the Bermas Brigade. Don't go to the Joe Rogan Experience. I don't know why that happened, but you definitely go to my page. Check me out there. It's youtube.com/Infowar. You can follow me on Twitter at Jason Bermas, Bermas. I got a GoFundMe. That'd be great. But really, just help me out, man. Just share my info. That's what I'm about. I give away everything for free, including all my documentary films, because it's all about getting the information out there. And who knows, maybe you can have a conversation with your family, the extended family around the turkey table about something that matters. Use Epstein. Seems like everybody's uniting around that. Maybe you can sneak in some truth via that. It's not a right or left issue. And most of the issues out there really aren't right or left. It's the predator class versus the rest of us. So, Ricky, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. Great having us both on.
Yeah, thanks. Sam Tripoli is supposed to join us. Maybe we'll do another one of these, have him on. I know he does the sports podcast also, and he's also in Conspiracies, so he's a perfect fit for this conversation. He just messed up with the specific time where it was supposed to, he didn't know it was Eastern time or whatnot, or he's a comedian. Things happen, He's cleaner. I'd say he did a line of coke, but thanks again, guys. Have a great holiday, and I'll hopefully talk to you guys soon, and keep up the great work. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, man.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
You too.
Believe in the ripple effect.